I've been using the Big 6 now for about 6 months, and I've got myself a little checklist of all the things that I run through before I have a session, and I thought I might share it with you. My name's Alex Biggs, I'm from Soundbase Studios. Let's get into it. The first thing I do is make sure that I don't open the door when the Big 6 isn't on. I run a Windows system, Windows 10, and into Cubase, and what happens is it will default to your computer's ASIO driver if you open up Cubase while the desk isn't on. So it's a real pain to change because sometimes it can change all your channel buses. It's just a nightmare. So basically what I always do is turn my computer on, turn the Big 6 on, then run into my Cubase. Once the computer's on and Cubase is turned on, I check the LED is lit on the power and the USB, so I know they're connected. I open up a project or just start either a template or a blank session. What I'm going to do here is show you a blank session. So this is where I would do the checklist for a blank session more than a template. What I need to do, I'm just going to quickly check how I'm using it. So I'll go into Studio, and then I'll just double check it has got the solid state. I don't normally have to do that, but while I'm doing the video, as you're probably aware, it defaults to 1 and 2. So I've set up some presets in here. So if I go to one of my presets, if I'm summing or I'm using a reverb, or I've just using 4 mono, 4 stereo, whatever I want really. I've set up presets which really help. So I'll do this one because it's got everything. Now I can just do 15 and 16, but what I'm going to do is do a mirror image of everything in the desk. Now because this has got 5 and 6, sometimes when you set up a project it will have 5 and 6, so you can move the buses by deleting and redoing them. So when you add your track, so I'll add an audio track, it sometimes comes up 5 and 6 there instead of 1. Channel 3, make it mono, and it's going to go out of 15 and 16. So that's the track set up. Now I'm going to show you what I need to push on the desk. So I've tried to put all the buttons up. You might see some LEDs because I've got a couple of mics attached for later on. So everything is up on the desk. The only thing I keep down is the main, because that goes to my monitors. The other thing I always try and keep down is the auto release on the compressor, because I just find that better for me. 15 and 16, if I'm not using the externals, I'll push that down. So that means it can talk to the computer. If I want to send anything to this bus, I'll push that down as well. So let's go through the channels 1 to 4, and this is what I check through. So at the top here, we've got the high Z. So if I'm recording bass, I'll obviously press that down. Otherwise, I'll make sure it's up. The line, as you can see, I've got channels which have a line and an XLR. I can leave both in, it's not a problem. It defaults to XLR unless you push the line, and then it defaults to the line or goes to the line input. High pass filters do exactly what it says. If you look at the diagram here, it cuts it at 75. If you think that a male vocalist is about 100 Hertz, can maybe get down to 80, unless he's a Mongolian throat singer, you should be all right with that. And that will stop all that mic rumble and any interference that you might get in the low end. So a great feature. I use that quite a lot. The 48 Phantom is obviously if it's phantom power. The mic I've got on this channel and this channel are dynamic mics, so I don't need that. So I've done my check here, so that's all fine. All the buttons are up, everything is good. Now I need the gain. I've pushed that, set that to quite high because it's dynamic. What I'm going to do is make sure that none of these are pressed down, because at the moment I'm recording into the desk, so that needs to be up. The reverse polarity I hardly ever use. You can do it in the DAW, but it might be something you want to mess around with there. Then coming down to your Q sends, don't forget, for these to work you need to have a signal coming into this, and then you can work through here in this section, which I'll go through probably in part 2. I don't want to make this too long. You can either push down STQ 1 or 2. I always try and go for 1 because I think that's the default. It defaults to over here is 1. Now the other thing is you've got this post button. So what will happen is it will go to pre-fader, and then if you press it down, it will go to post, and then you can use it for sending effects. With my EQ, if I'm recording, I'll press it on because I don't know how true it is. I can't hear the difference, but they say it's good to run through the EQ just to give it a bit of color. Now, I tend to use the bell curve on the high frequencies and not so much on the low. And again, don't forget you've got bell on high and low. Obviously press it on to work it. Now with EQ, be a bit careful because you don't want to EQ too much, because once you've recorded that EQ, you're stuck. So I generally use the EQ when I'm summing or coming back into the DAW when I'm mixing. So just be a bit careful about how you use the EQ. Sometimes you do want to use it on, say, bass guitar, or certain things you do need it when you're recording, but again, use tiny amounts. The other thing I check is that my pans haven't been moved or my balances over to the right or left. So I make sure that they're in the middle. The compressor, again, make sure that isn't down, but if I need it, I'll push it down. I don't often use the compressor. Maybe if I'm recording a bass guitar, I might add a tiny bit, but with vocals, you can really ruin or squash the vocals. And again, once it's recorded, you can't get back what you've done. So if you're going to use any of these functions, just use them very slightly. Okay, so that will obviously turn the compressor on or off, and there's your gain. So the SSL I don't use on the individual channels because it's more of a mix bus processor. So I have got some inserts which I push here, and then I can insert the fusion when I want, and then I can record it back when I'm summing. I'll go into that perhaps a bit later in the part 2. Just checking down, so the insert, I make sure it's up. USB out post fader. When you're recording, you want to keep the USB button down. The PFL button, what you can do is obviously check your level with it, but instead of muting all of these channels all the time, you just hit that and that becomes solo. So it's like a double function almost. I don't know why I didn't know that, but yeah, so that's a really handy thing if you've got everything coming through and you just want to hear something to EQ, just push the PFL, and obviously you can gain stage using that as well. So gain staging, when you're doing your gain staging, obviously using the PFL, don't forget, obviously this is too low, but this is because I'm not talking into the mic. But when you're gain staging, you've got what's called a lot of headroom. Now headroom's obviously confused a bit, but headroom actually means, as from what I've read up on, is the amount of gain you can have after your normal amount before it distorts. So you might be on that yellow and then the singer gets really loud, it doesn't go red, it goes up just a small amount. So that's a lot of headroom on these channels. The other thing to note is that if you gain a lot up here with, say, tube mics, they tend to hiss a bit, so be a little bit careful that you don't push it up in your DAW because it might hiss a bit. So you want to make sure that you've got the levels really well on this, and you can obviously with this in your DAW add a lot of volume to it, but that's, as I say, that's when you might run into hisses or hissing. The other thing to check is that your monitor's turned up. Mine's way up only because I'm going to this monitor controller just because it's right where I want it. So this is why, and because I do a lot of teaching drum lessons, what I want to do is make sure that when they're talking, as I turn it up, and when they play, turn it down. So I constantly need something rather than keep stretching over. So that's why I've literally done the monitor out into this. Now, as for the talkback mic, what we've got here is your talkback. You generally want that on because that gives a lot of gain, and obviously your compression, plus 48 if you've got a condenser microphone, but I've obviously got a dynamic, as I said. So if you want to record this, all you got to do is push down 9 and 10, or that one, depends on which talk button you're using. So I'd push talk here, and then I can record. So let me show you a few bits in the DAW and how that all works. What I've got is a track set up. As I say, you can see here track free, and it's going out of 15 and 16. So if I push this monitor button, you can hear that the track free is working and the level seems all right. Now, if I add another track, make sure you use a stereo track when you want to use all these tracks here, unless you just click a left or whatever. Okay, so this is the talkback mic. Now, as I say, you can record it just by going to 9 and 10. And then if I click the monitor, you can see it's there. The gain for the talkback is here. I've pushed down 9 and 10. So when I lift that up, you can see it doesn't record. When I push it down, it does. That is how you record the talkback. So that's a great feature because that gives you another little input, which is useful for whatever you want. The compressor. So with the compressor, as I say, I always keep it on auto. You've got your makeup gain. So if you add a lot of compression by turning it left and then it goes quiet, you can obviously make it back up to what the volume was. So this sends the Q1 to the compressor, and this is why I think it sort of defaults more that side to Q1. I'll go into that in the next video. I'm going to do another video about all the Q sends, the headphones and the rest of the bits of the desk, what I have to check before an artist comes. Hope you've enjoyed the video and it's become useful, and if it is, subscribe, hit the bell icon, watch out for the next one. I'll see you next time. Take care.